Hi, I'm just going to talk real quick about different aiming exercises and different skills in aiming that I see both in Splatoon and in other shooters. The two skills that I do see are snapping and tracking. Snapping is basically um, important for single shot weapons where you immediately jump to a target, and tracking is just staying on a target, which is important for most shooters since you need sustained hits, but both skills are important for any weapon. Um, First exercise that I like to do to warm up is just snapping to stationary targets. Um, when you're doing this, I would recommend not firing, and essentially what you want to do is snap to the target and stay on it, and then you can shoot after you've confirmed that you're on it. You don't want to shoot before that, because then sometimes you'll like snap quickly and just shoot without checking if you've hit them. And especially when you want to get to the point where you're shooting once you're sure you're going to hit the shot. Um, in general, what you want to optimize is fastest time to sticking to the target. So like turning faster isn't necessarily better if you're going to overshoot it every time. So like fast turn like this, where you overshoot, is worse than if you went a bit slower but stayed on the target. Um, so yeah, that's really the idea of it. You can do it with any of these. Don't do what I was just doing. Make sure you stick to the target first. Um, the next step up is obviously snapping to some of these moving targets, which is a bit more difficult, obviously. And while I'm doing this, you notice that my natural instinct is to follow them, which is, of course, the second skill, namely tracking. Um, the exercise I like to do for tracking is to switch to jet and just try to keep the hit reticle up on this furthest or middle moving target. And one thing I always like to make sure I'm doing is following it at the leading edge, because you'll notice that sometimes it's possible to have the hit reticle and still not hit it. And obviously this depends on your weapon, and it depends on how far back you are. The jetty probably has the longest lead distance of any weapon, so unless you're specifically playing jetty, I don't think it's worth it to practice leading ahead of the target, which is why I just like to stay on the front edge. And you can hit on the front edge with jetty, depending on the distance. But yeah, those are the two basic exercises. And then usually from there I like to mix it up and like snap to the different ones as they move and try to continue tracking them. Which is obviously a bit more difficult. I don't think you need to shoot at all for any of these exercises. You can shoot just to confirm that where you're tracking will hit, like you don't want that. But it's best if you're confirming on your own weapon, and of course if your weapon is a lot shorter range, you can feel free to do this tracking up close as well. In fact, on any range weapon you should do it up close, because it gives you a wider move radius to have to move between. So I just want to talk about weapon specifics for a bit. One thing that's important for shooters is aiming while strafing. So I'll practice doing something like this for shooters. You want to practice this both at your max range, which is a lot harder, and also at close range, just because the type of aim adjustments you have to do are very different. And I would also practice this with sub-strafing, so doing something like this. Don't throw your bomb. And I also recommend going like different directions while doing this. And once again, you want to do this at max range and close range. Obviously, you want to hit those shots. It's a fairly difficult drill, but it's definitely very helpful. A couple notes about blasters really quick. First of all, just for aiming in general, if you're going for a direct, you should try to get as close as possible. So normally you want to keep them at the edge of your range so that you can indirect kill them if you miss the direct. If you're specifically going for a direct, you should get right on top of them, like this. I see a lot of top level blaster players doing this. It just makes it easy to hit the direct. But obviously in some weapons getting that close is dangerous. So against rollers, for example, I would not do that. The other thing to notice with blasters is just that the shot tends to come out very late. Like I'm pressing the button right now. You see it takes a while to come out. So here, I'm actually pressing the button and moving the camera at about the same time. And you can see that with enough speed, I can get all the way to the target before the shot actually comes out. So if you're trying to do it as fast as possible, you should do it beforehand. But keep in mind that that will reduce your accuracy. Like I was saying before, you want to be sure you're going to hit a shot before you take it. This also means that you need to lead a bit more with this weapon. For directs, you see there I shot completely in front of the dummy. That was a bit too far, but you get the picture. For chargers, my main advice would just be to go slow and always make sure that you have a shot before you take a shot. And what I mean by that is basically the same thing we were doing with snapping, where you confirm and stay on the target. Obviously, it's not that simple with targets that are in motion, but basically make sure that you're actually tracking it before you release the shot. And obviously that's not going to give you 100% accuracy because players are unpredictable. But sometimes I see a lot of chargers basically saying, oh, I'm going to take a shot once this is full, and I'm just going to shoot, and if I don't hit it, I'll charge another one. Your accuracy will be a lot better if you go slower and don't release a shot until you're stuck to the target. In general, when you're playing a match, after doing these exercises, try to always be very purposeful about how you're aiming and think about how you're aiming. Think about when you're firing. Make sure you're trying to snap and stick to a target before firing. Obviously, you can't take as long in a match as you can in the practice range, but by being more slow and careful, I think in general it will help pretty much everyone improve their aim. Keep in mind there's also some elements of aim in this game that are about prediction, so especially when people are swimming, or even more so with Ninja Squid, sometimes you kind of need to predict where they're going to be and aim there, especially with lag, and that's just a matter of experience. But don't underestimate how big of a part of aim that is. There's a lot of things about expecting where people will be that will help your aim immensely, and I'm not going to cover those too much here, so I hope the drills are helpful.